Originally released in 1997 and developed by DMA Design and published by ASC Games in North America and Take-Two Interactive in PAL regions, and by BMG Interactive for the UK specifically, it's Grand Theft Auto.
Grand Theft Auto.
What you're currently seeing on screen is the PlayStation 1 version of the game. It's also available for the PC, and was also later released for the Game Boy Color in 1999, which itself is a review for another time. However, with that being said, one thing of interest to note, the game was originally intended to be a Commodore Amiga title, but by the time the project began its life in 1996, the Amiga hardware was getting pretty out of date, so development shifted focus to the PC and the newly released PlayStation hardware. The executives over at BMG Interactive brought over two men who previously worked in BMG's music publishing side of the business to look over the project at the time known as Race and Chase. These two men, both brothers known as Dan and Sam Hauser, arrived at DMA Design and were presented with the original concept and demo of Race and Chase, which at its core originally was a racing game with an open-world structure, where the player character could steal other vehicles and do missions for the mob, and had an open-ended mission structure, where the player could do essentially whatever they wish and could ignore missions altogether if they so desired. In the end, both Dan and Sam Hauser were absolutely blown away by what they were shown. The project was then simply renamed to Grand Theft Auto. As for the game itself, in Grand Theft Auto you choose your character, you can also rename them if you wish, select your first city you're given at the start of the game, and away you go. Your primary goal is to amass a score of over 1 million points. Once you reach this, you can then progress to the next level or city. The game has 3 cities: Liberty City, Vice City, and San Andreas, all of which would become pretty iconic in the years to come. Liberty City essentially being a mock-up of New York City, Vice City obviously being Miami, and San Andreas I'm assuming being San Francisco. Each city has 2 levels. Each level is more or less just a different set of missions scattered around for you to do, if you so desire. Every time you complete a mission, you're rewarded with a score multiplier, allowing you to gain more points in a quicker succession. You can find items around the world in these boxes that range from different weapons, to body armor, to extra lives, and get out of jail keys, which basically let you keep your score multiplier if you're busted by the cops. But is any of this any good? Let's find out with the good. Easily the best aspect of this game is the vast open world environments themselves. Back in 1997 and 1998, few games offered any form of an open world environment like this, let alone gave this level of player freedom. Failed a mission? Who cares? Grab a machine gun and start blowing up cars and shooting pedestrians to vent your frustration. The game won't penalize you for failing a mission. It may insult you, but it won't penalize you. The only thing you have to worry about is dying or getting arrested. If that happens, you lose a life and your multiplier goes back down to 1. But that of course brings up probably the best thing about GTA, the absolute mayhem you can cause in this game. Featuring a variety of different weapons at your disposal, from your typical pistol and machine gun, to some more advanced stuff like the flamethrower and missile launcher. Running around GTA and simply causing havoc never gets old for me personally, and has easily become a staple of this franchise for plenty of people. Then of course throwing some fun cheats to the mayhem you can utilize by simply changing the character name at the start of the game to whatever cheat you want activated, and you're in for a good time. As for the audio and soundtrack side of things, the music in this game is some pretty catchy stuff, and notably it's all in-house produced and not licensed music like future iterations of the franchise. As for the overall sound effects, they're passable at best. But despite some fun destruction and mayhem and catchy tunes, there's always the bad. Unfortunately, despite the juggernaut the GTA franchise is now, the first game in this iconic series hasn't exactly aged well. The controls, for example, are extremely clunky and awkward by today's standards. Everything from basic movement to driving and the weapons all feels and controls pretty terribly in my opinion. In order to move around the environment or drive, for example, you first press down X to actually move, and then you basically shift your movement by using the D-pad. So this should give you a rough idea of why the controls are pretty clunky. Then throw in trying to actually shoot someone with this control scheme, and you're better off just spraying and praying with the machine gun. And graphically speaking, the game isn't exactly much to look at, even for 1997 standards. Considering at the time 3D polygonal graphics and worlds were all the rage on the PlayStation 1 and N64, having a top-down, slightly 2.5D game wasn't exactly impressive. On top of that, regardless of what character you picked in the selection menu, you'll still end up with the same pixelated white dude despite whomever you pick. Even worse, the camera in this game is an absolute nightmare. It's a top-down isometric camera perspective, and constantly zooming in and out depending on the speed you're going in a vehicle. So of course, this being an open world with a top-down camera view, you'll be constantly smacking into buildings or vehicles ahead of you that you simply can't see to begin with. Adding to this frustration, the game also doesn't have any kind of in-game map system. However, the game itself did come with an actual physical map if you want to try and wrap your head around that to navigate, or if you're playing the digital version, you'll have to look up the map online. So the only way to really navigate your way around the world during the missions is by following this tiny little arrow pointing in the general direction you need to go. Now that's fine and all, but whenever a mission is on another island, you need to go across a bridge to simply get to it. And chances are you'll end up spending a good couple of minutes driving around the world simply trying to look for the bridge to cross. It also doesn't help much when some of them are broken. For the time it was released in 1997 and early 1998, the open-world environments of Grand Theft Auto were a fairly uncommon thing to see in video games. But sadly, in my opinion, the game hasn't exactly aged nearly as good as many other iconic games from this era have. Sadly, the clunky controls and awful camera scheme would more than likely scare away most new people and fans looking to see what the roots of their favorite franchise was like. But at the end of the day, for what it's worth, the franchise would continue chugging forward and gain more media attraction, and soon enough it would become one of the most iconic game franchises of all time, which we'll get to covering soon enough. But with that being said, now it's time for my rating.